Every day your mind is under siege. Notifications, endless scrolling, mental noise, and 1,000 things competing for your attention. You wake up with good intentions, but somewhere between sunrise and sunset, your energy scatters, your focus leaks, and the version of you that was supposed to build something meaningful gets buried under distractions. But what if your ability to focus is not just a skill, it's your greatest superpower? What if reclaiming your attention is the single most important decision you could make for your future? The Stoics believed that attention was sacred, that the mind, when undisturbed and directed, could reshape the world. And modern neuroscience agrees. The quality of your life is directly tied to what you focus on. Yet most people live in a fog, not because they're weak, but because no one taught them how to train their mind like a muscle. No one showed them that focus isn't just discipline, it's identity. In this episode, we'll explore how to shift your brain into deep focus mode, not through willpower alone, but through strategy, structure, and intention. We'll blend ancient wisdom with cutting-edge science to show you how to cut through the noise, reclaim your clarity, and finally take control of your time, your energy, and your mind. This isn't about productivity hacks. It's about becoming someone whose focus is unshakable, because you've made it who you are. Are you ready? Stop letting the world steal your attention. Not just your time, but your inner stillness, your clarity, your ability to sit with a single thought without it being hijacked. Because, make no mistake, the modern world is built to fracture your mind. Every ping is a temptation. Every scroll is a shortcut. Every dopamine hit is a slow erosion of your ability to stay with anything long enough to go deep. And when everything is shallow, nothing is meaningful. You begin your day with a clear idea of what matters, and by evening, you've given your mind away in 1,000 tiny exchanges. None of them felt dangerous, but all of them added up. You didn't lose your focus. It was taken from you, piece by piece, while you were too distracted to notice. Focus isn't just a habit, it's a form of self-respect. When you choose to stay present with what matters most, you're telling the world, this is mine, my mind, my moment, my life. But when you don't guard it, the world will rent space in your head for free. It will flood your thoughts with urgency, but not importance. It will seduce you with speed, but leave you empty of depth. And the cost isn't just wasted hours, it's a diminished version of you, spread too thin to ever feel whole. The Stoics knew this. Seneca warned that we are not given a short life, we just waste much of it. Epictetus taught that our minds are like ships, easily hijacked by winds and waves, unless we learn to steer. And Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, reminded himself every morning to return to what is essential and discard the rest. To be ruthless with what enters the mind, because what you allow in shapes who you become. They lived without smartphones, without notifications, without infinite scroll, and yet they still struggled to protect their inner peace. What excuse do we have now? But here's the good news. The power to reclaim your mind begins the moment you notice it's been taken, the moment you pause, not to react, but to become aware. Awareness is the gate. It's not about guilt, and it's not about perfection. It's about seeing clearly that every time you give in to the noise, you're not just losing time, you're practicing distraction. And every time you resist, you're practicing sovereignty. You don't need more apps to manage your focus. You need more courage to say no to the things that don't deserve your energy, to the people who fragment your attention, to the habits that promise comfort but cost you everything. Because the moment you begin treating your attention like it's sacred, the world starts treating you differently too. So the next time your hand reaches for your phone without thinking, stop, breathe, ask yourself, is this how I want to spend my life? Because that's exactly what's at stake. Your life, one stolen moment at a time. Why did the Stoics see focus as real power? Because they understood something that modern culture has forgotten, that your ability to control your attention is the foundation of freedom. Not the freedom to do anything you want, but the freedom to stay with what truly matters when everything else is screaming for your energy. To the Stoics, the mind wasn't just a tool, it was the battleground, the space where clarity, peace, and wisdom either flourished or collapsed under distraction, and in their eyes the person who could remain anchored in thought while others were swept away by impulse was not just disciplined, they were powerful. Marcus Aurelius ruled the Roman Empire, yet his private writings speak less about politics and more about inner stillness. In the middle of chaos, betrayal, and war, he would remind himself, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." It wasn't a metaphor, it was a strategy. Because the Stoics weren't concerned with controlling everything, they focused on mastering the one thing that determines how we interpret everything: attention. Seneca, too, believed that scattered minds lead to scattered lives. He observed that most people aren't living, they're just reacting. They run from one moment to the next, owned by the noise around them. And so, they never truly live a day that is theirs. The Stoic path, then, was about coming home to yourself, about reclaiming the space between stimulus and response, about no longer being a slave to the next urge, the next distraction, the next opinion. And here's the paradox. Focus isn't loud, it's quiet. It doesn't announce itself with urgency. It whispers. It asks you to sit still, to go deeper, to resist the easy exit of interruption. And that's why so few people cultivate it. Because it's not exciting. It's uncomfortable. Focus forces you to confront the work, the silence, the depth. It doesn't let you escape. But if you stay with it long enough, it gives you something the world can't: clarity, strength, and peace that isn't dependent on circumstances. So, when the Stoics wrote about training the mind, they weren't offering philosophy for scholars. They were building shields, teaching you how to stay calm when the storm comes, because it always does. And when it hits, the man or woman who has trained their attention, who has made focus their home, will not be broken. They will see clearly, decide wisely, and act with strength while others react with panic. That's real power. Not control over others, but control over yourself, over your thoughts, your reactions, your attention. And the more you master that, the less the world can shake you. Modern science confirms what the Stoics intuited centuries ago. Your brain is not designed for constant stimulation. In fact, the more you overload it, the less it's able to focus. The prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for attention, decision-making, and self-control, is like a spotlight. It can't shine in all directions at once. When you try to multitask, when you allow interruptions to invade your space, that spotlight flickers, it dims, and over time, your ability to hold attention deteriorates, like an untrained muscle growing weaker by the day. Researchers have studied this decline. One landmark study from the University of London showed that constant multitasking actually lowers your IQ temporarily more than marijuana use. That's how serious the cost is. Every time you check your phone while working, every time you interrupt deep thought with shallow input, your brain pays a tax, a cognitive switching penalty. You're not just losing seconds, you're losing clarity, insight, and your capacity to think deeply. And here's the more sobering truth. The distracted brain becomes the default brain. The more you feed it fast information, novelty, and fragmented input, the more it craves it. Dopamine, the neurotransmitter of reward, is released every time you scroll, click, check. It creates a feedback loop. Not because you're weak, but because your brain is doing exactly what it was wired to do: seek stimulation, avoid boredom, chase reward. But in the modern world, that ancient wiring is hijacked, and the cost is profound. Think about it. How many brilliant thoughts have died in the space between one notification and the next? How many hours have been lost not in big, dramatic moments, but in tiny, forgettable distractions that pulled you away from what mattered? We imagine distraction as a thief that kicks down the door, but more often it's a whisper, a tap on the shoulder, and "I'll just check quickly," that becomes an hour of mental fog. The brain you build is the brain you live with, and a distracted brain cannot build a focused life. But here's the hopeful side of the science: neuroplasticity. Your brain is not fixed. It changes with use, which means that just as it adapts to chaos, it can also readapt to calm. With deliberate practice, by removing constant inputs, reducing digital noise, and training attention like a muscle, you can literally rewire the circuits that govern focus. You can become someone who is calm under pressure, present in conversation, fully engaged in the task at hand, not because you force yourself, but because your brain has learned how to stay. So when the Stoics spoke of self-mastery, and when neuroscience speaks of attentional control, they're pointing to the same thing: a brain that obeys you, a mind that doesn't drift without permission, and a life that isn't lost in the shallow, endless current of noise. The danger with modern distraction is that it rarely feels dangerous. It wears a friendly face: entertainment, productivity tools, even learning resources. But underneath the surface, many of these things are traps disguised as opportunities, hidden traps that kill your concentration not in one blow, but by 1,000 subtle cuts. You sit down to work, but you leave your email open. A message pops up and you answer. Then a social media notification. Then a news headline. None of these seem harmful on their own, but each one slices your attention just a little thinner, until your brain is stretched so wide it can no longer go deep. Psychologists call this attentional residue. When you switch from task to task, even for a few seconds, your brain doesn't fully let go of what came before. A part of your cognitive resources remain tied to the previous thing, dragging mental clutter into the present moment. So even if you return to your original task, you're not fully there. Your attention is fractured, your processing is slower, your clarity is blurred. You think you're being productive, but really you're just skimming across the surface of thought. The Stoics would call this slavery, not to a person, but to impulses. Seneca warned against becoming a slave to your schedule, your cravings, and the opinions of others. Today, that slavery looks different. It's the inability to go 5 minutes without reaching for your phone. It's the addiction to updates, the fear of missing out, the compulsion to react instead of reflect. And like all forms of slavery, it comes with a price: your freedom to direct your own mind. But if you can name the traps, you can escape them. One of the most dangerous is digital multitasking, thinking you can focus while consuming multiple streams of information. Another is ambient noise, a cluttered workspace, an open tab, background conversations that leak into your thoughts. And perhaps the most insidious is internal distraction, your own thoughts spiraling without control, especially when you're anxious, tired, or unprepared. These are the enemies of focus. Not because they are evil, but because they're unnoticed, because they become normal. So how do you reclaim your attention? Start by observing. Watch how your mind shifts. Notice when your focus is stolen. Ask yourself, was this interruption necessary? Was this distraction a choice or a reaction? Awareness is the beginning of liberation. You can't fight what you don't see. And the more you see the trap for what it is, the more you remember. You are not your impulses. You are not your distractions. You are the one watching, choosing, guiding. The Stoics trained themselves to see the invisible chains. To them, real discipline wasn't about control. It was about clarity, knowing what serves you and what doesn't. And once you see that, you can begin to design a life where distraction isn't the master, but the defeated. Clarity is the rarest form of power in today's world. Not intelligence, not talent, clarity. The ability to cut through the fog and say, this matters, that doesn't. The modern mind drowns not because it's weak, but because it's overloaded, bombarded with so much input that everything starts to feel important and nothing gets done. That's why one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself is the discipline to cut the noise and get crystal clear on what truly matters. The Stoics believed that virtue begins with reason, and reason begins with clarity. Marcus Aurelius would ask himself repeatedly, is this essential? If not, he trained himself to let it go. Because focus isn't just about paying attention, it's about choosing what to ignore. In fact, most of your power lies not in what you do, but in what you refuse to be distracted by. And that's where modern life becomes treacherous. Because distraction doesn't always look like temptation. Sometimes it looks like opportunity. You'll be tempted to do more, to say yes, to chase every idea, every possibility, every potential win. But unless you learn to separate the meaningful from the meaningless, your energy will be spread so thin it becomes invisible. And invisible effort creates invisible results. You'll be working, but not progressing, busy, but not becoming. This is where clarity becomes sacred. What do you actually want? Not what sounds impressive, not what others expect, but what you, deep down, know is aligned with your values and vision. Until you answer that question, focus will always feel like a struggle, because you're trying to aim at too many targets at once. So, slow down. Ask yourself, what are my top 3 priorities in life right now? What actions support those priorities? What distractions are costing me energy without giving anything back? Don't just think it, write it, define it. Because clarity doesn't live in vague thoughts. It lives in concrete decisions. The moment you define what truly matters, the path forward simplifies. You stop wasting energy on everything else. You stop trying to be everywhere and start being deeply present where it counts. This is how clarity becomes a filter. Every new task, every invitation, every idea, you run it through the filter. Does this help me become who I want to be? If not, it's noise. Let it go. Because the enemy of greatness isn't failure. It's distraction from the meaningful. Once you learn to cut the noise, you'll realize something powerful. Focus isn't forced. It flows naturally when you remove everything that blocks it. Your mind, once cleared, becomes a laser. And when that laser is pointed at something meaningful, you don't just make progress. You build a life that reflects the best of who you are. The mind is not a machine that switches on when you want it to. It's more like a river. It flows best when guided, not forced. And yet, most people treat focus like a demand. Concentrate now. Get to work. But without structure, without rhythm, the mind resists. it drifts, it rebels. That's why high performers throughout history, from ancient philosophers to modern athletes, understood one simple truth. To enter a state of deep focus, you need a ritual, a signal to the brain that says, it's time. These rituals don't have to be elaborate. In fact, the simpler, the better. A quiet cup of tea before writing, a walk without a phone before starting the day, lighting a candle, adjusting the lighting, putting on noise, cancelling headphones. The ritual doesn't matter as much as the repetition, because repetition becomes association. And over time, your brain starts to recognize the pattern. This action means focus is coming. It prepares itself before you even begin. This is how you train your mind to shift gears, not through force, but through familiarity. Neuroscience tells us that habits reduce cognitive load. They save energy by turning effort into instinct, and this applies to attention as well. The more consistent your ritual, the faster your brain transitions into the state you want. You stop fighting yourself. You stop waiting to feel ready. Your environment becomes the switch. In Stoic terms, this is the practice of intentional living. Epictetus taught that we should approach life with care, that even the smallest things, how we dress, how we sit, how we begin the day, shape the state of our soul. And, in the same way, how you begin your work, how you open a book, how you enter a conversation, all of it shapes the depth of your presence. When your rituals are deliberate, your mind becomes more disciplined, more stable, more focused. But here's where many people get it wrong. They think rituals are constraints. That discipline is the opposite of freedom, but the opposite is true. Rituals are what liberate you from chaos, from indecision, from mental noise. They are the scaffolding that supports your best self. When your day is anchored by small, sacred acts of intention, your focus no longer depends on motivation. It becomes who you are. So ask yourself, what is my signal to begin? What ritual can I build, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, nothing fancy, that tells my brain, we're entering deep work now? Maybe it's closing all tabs. Maybe it's breathing slowly. Maybe it's writing down one clear intention. Whatever it is, do it again and again until it becomes your rhythm. Because a focused life is not a spontaneous one. It is a designed one. And design begins with the details you choose to repeat every single day. The difference between distraction and deep focus often comes down to this. Do you let your day pull you in every direction, or do you set the stage for how your mind will show up? Build the ritual, trust the rhythm, and let that rhythm carry you into your most focused, powerful self. Imagine you had a treasure chest, one filled with gold, rare gems, priceless artifacts. Would you leave it open in the middle of a busy street? Would you let strangers reach in, grab what they want, and walk away? Of course not. And yet every day, we allow the most valuable resource we possess, our attention, to be taken without a second thought. We check notifications the moment they arrive. We let emails, headlines, scrolling feeds hijack our focus, again and again, until what's left isn't a clear mind, but a fragmented one. You must begin to protect your attention like it's gold, because it is. What you give your attention to grows. What you feed your mind with shapes your reality, and most people are starving their best ideas while feeding their worst distractions. The Stoics would call this a kind of self-neglect, not because you're failing, but because you're unaware. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You become what you give your attention to." If you do not choose what thoughts and images you expose yourself to, someone else will. That's not a metaphor, it's a warning. And neuroscience agrees. Your brain is shaped by what it repeatedly attends to. This is called neuroplasticity, the mind's ability to rewire itself based on experience. If you live in constant distraction, your brain learns how to be distracted. If you practice focus, your brain learns how to focus. Every time you choose where to look, what to read, what to respond to, you are training your future self, either toward clarity or toward chaos. So, how do you protect your attention in a world that profits from stealing it? It begins with boundaries, real ones. Turn off unnecessary notifications, not just temporarily, but permanently. Use apps that block social media during your deep work hours. Keep your phone out of reach when doing meaningful tasks. Build invisible fences around your mental energy and guard them fiercely. The goal is not to become a monk, it's to become conscious, to stop living in reaction and start choosing with intention. But this isn't just about cutting things out, it's also about what you let in. Who do you listen to? What voices are shaping your beliefs? What environments are you spending your time in? Protecting your attention means being selective, discerning. Not everything deserves space in your mind, and the more ruthless you become about protecting that space, the more room you create for depth, clarity, and creativity. This is not easy. It never will be, but no transformation is ever painless. The reward, however, is profound. A life that is no longer lived on autopilot, but by design. A mind that is no longer scattered, but centered. And a self that is no longer reactive, but deliberate. You wouldn't leave your door open at night. Don't leave your attention open either. Focus is not a permanent state. It's a returning, a practice, a quiet, repeated act of coming home to the present moment again and again. Your mind will wander. It's not a flaw, it's the nature of a thinking brain. But what separates the distracted from the focused is not whether the mind strays, it's how quickly and consistently it returns. Think of your attention like a beam of light. Every time you bring it back to the task, the breath, the moment in front of you, you're strengthening a muscle most people never train. You're telling your brain, this is what matters. Stay here. Stay with it. The Stoics didn't speak of focus in the modern sense, but they understood the necessity of presence. Epictetus said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." In that statement is hidden a kind of mental training, letting go of needing to impress others, to be everywhere, to know everything. True presence requires you to let go of the need to escape this moment for another, to quiet the ego and sit inside discomfort, boredom, effort. And the science agrees. Focus is a trainable process. In cognitive psychology, this is called attentional control, and it's foundational for executive function, the part of your brain responsible for this. Mainly, the prefrontal cortex strengthens when you practice meditation, single tasking, and intentional refocusing. Not when you try to do 10 things at once. Not when you compulsively check your phone to avoid discomfort. To train your mind to return is not about force. It's about softness. You notice you've wandered. You acknowledge it without judgment, and you gently bring it back, again and again, like training a loyal animal. Not with punishment, but with patience. You don't berate the dog for running away. You guide it back with presence and repetition. Your mind is no different. This practice can begin anywhere. When you're writing and feel the urge to check something unrelated. When you're having a conversation and your thoughts drift. When you're reading and your eyes move forward, but your mind moves backward. These are all moments to return, each one an opportunity to reclaim the moment. And the beautiful thing is, This quiet act of returning doesn't just improve your productivity, it changes your relationship with time. You begin to feel less rushed, less fractured. You begin to experience life more fully, not in fast forward, but in focus. And from that place, clarity returns, creativity flows, peace emerges. So the next time you notice your attention slipping, don't judge yourself, just come back, train the return, and trust that every time you do, you're shaping a stronger, calmer, more capable mind. Distractions aren't just obstacles, they're messengers. Every time your mind pulls away from the task, it's revealing something, a hidden discomfort, an unmet need, a deeper craving for novelty or escape. And if you learn to observe these moments instead of fighting them, you can begin to turn them into tools for growth. We usually think of distractions as the enemy. Social media, noise, conversations, even our own thoughts. But the Stoics would challenge us to go deeper. Seneca once wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." What he understood is that distraction is often our mind's way of avoiding the deeper reality, the hard work, the silence, the confrontation with ourselves. So rather than labeling distraction as failure, what if we viewed it as feedback, a signal that there's something unresolved, something worth understanding? When your mind drifts, ask, why now? Is it boredom? Is it fear? Is it the emotional cost of confronting something uncomfortable? The human brain seeks stimulation not because it's weak, but because it's wired to avoid pain and seek reward. The dopamine circuits in the brain are always on the lookout for the next hit, something easier, something more pleasurable, something faster. But here's the paradox. The more you feed distraction, the more it feeds on you. The more you escape the discomfort of deep work, the more alien deep work becomes. The more you run from silence, the more terrifying it starts to feel. So instead of running, turn and face it. Use distractions as a mirror. If you find yourself constantly pulled toward your phone, what are you avoiding? If you can't sit still with a single task, what anxiety is bubbling beneath the surface? If you're always jumping from one thing to the next, what are you afraid will catch up if you pause? The Stoics practiced what we might call inner stillness, a discipline not just of the body, but of the mind. And that stillness isn't the absence of thought, it's the presence of awareness, a quiet strength that notices the urge to flee and chooses not to. You can build that strength. Every time you delay the urge to check, scroll, swipe, every time you stay just 1 minute longer with discomfort, you rewire the brain. Neuroplasticity means that your patterns are not permanent, and that's the hopeful truth. Distraction is a habit, but so is focus, and you can choose which one you strengthen. So the next time you feel pulled away, don't beat yourself up. Smile even, because now you've been given a clue, an invitation to train deeper, to understand yourself more honestly, to grow not by removing all noise, but by rising above it. This is what the focused life is. Not a life without interruption, but a life where every interruption becomes an opportunity for self-mastery. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your environment. It's a truth we often underestimate. We imagine ourselves as isolated beings, powered by will alone. But the Stoics and modern behavioral science tell a different story. Your surroundings shape your focus more than your intentions ever could. If your environment is filled with chaos, distractions, open tabs, cluttered desks, constant noise, then even the strongest mind will struggle to stay aligned. The battle for attention isn't just within you, it's around you. Epictetus spoke of the importance of choosing what you expose your soul to. He wasn't just talking about people, but about what enters your field of awareness every day. Today, your battlefield is your desk, your phone, your notifications, your workspace. And unless you take control of that space, it will take control of you. Design is not luxury, it's necessity. A focused mind needs a focused environment, not perfection, just intentionality. What you see when you sit down to work matters. What sounds you hear. What temptations are one click away. What your phone is doing beside you while you try to concentrate. These aren't minor details. They are the hidden architecture of your mental state. Behavioral researcher B.J. Fogg once said, "Environment is the invisible hand that shapes human behavior. If you want to be someone who lives in deep work, make sure your space reflects that. Remove what doesn't align. Add what supports your intention. Put the phone in another room. Use noise-canceling headphones. Close the 37 tabs. Keep your space clear, not for aesthetic beauty, but for mental clarity. And don't stop with the physical. Your digital environment matters just as much. What's on your homepage? What notifications hit your screen the moment you open your laptop? What apps are allowed to speak to your mind without your permission? Each one is a voice in your mental world. Are they building you or breaking you? The Stoic idea of euthymia, peaceful confidence, wasn't something they stumbled into. It was something they created by saying no to what distracted and yes to what mattered. Your external world is always nudging your internal world. So ask, is your space making focus harder or easier? This isn't about control for its own sake. It's about respect. Respecting your time, your energy, your ambition. You don't have to be ruthless, just deliberate. Create a space where your mind feels safe to go deep, uninterrupted. A space that tells your brain, here we focus. Because when you walk into an environment that speaks focus, your brain responds, it listens, and over time it learns. This is who we are now. This is what we do. We don't chase dopamine crumbs. We create something meaningful. And that is the power of design, not in decoration, but in direction. Losing focus isn't failure, it's feedback, yet most people treat it like a moral weakness, as if the moment their attention drifts, they've lost the battle. But even the greatest minds lose focus. The difference is, they don't panic, they don't spiral, they use it, they notice the drift, they pause, and then they return, again and again and again. The Stoics taught us to work with what is, not what we wish it would be. If your mind wanders, that doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're human, and it means your opportunity is still alive, because the power isn't in never losing focus. It's in how quickly you come back. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength that includes the moment your mind drifts to what you forgot, what you fear, or what someone else is doing. The drift is normal, but awareness is strength. The quicker you can notice when you're off course, the faster you return to clarity." This isn't just a philosophical idea, it's a neurological truth. Cognitive science calls it meta-awareness, the ability to notice that your attention has shifted and then guide it back without judgment. In mindfulness training, this is the rep, like a bicep curl for your brain. Every time your attention drifts and you gently bring it back, you're not failing, you're strengthening the muscle of focus. But this shift only happens when you stop fearing the fall, when you stop believing that every lapse is a flaw. In truth, every loss of focus is a door, a portal that leads you back to the present, if you're willing to walk through it. What if every time you caught yourself distracted, You smiled, not out of amusement, but out of recognition. That moment of catching yourself, of saying, "Ah, here I am again," that is your training ground. That's what the Stoics meant by self-mastery, not perfection, but return, over and over again, because focus isn't a static state. It's a relationship. And like any good relationship, it's built on returning after the drift. It's built on presence, patience, and repair. You don't abandon your values because you slipped. You recommit, and you do it gently, without drama. So the next time your thoughts scatter, your attention fades, or your energy fractures, don't scold yourself. Just breathe. Anchor yourself in the now. Look at your hands. Feel the weight of your body in the chair. Return as many times as it takes, because each return is a declaration. I'm still here. I'm still choosing what matters. And the more you train that return, the faster it becomes instinct. It becomes identity. You go from someone who gets lost in distraction to someone who always finds their way back. That's how you win, not by never drifting, but by never staying gone. There is a silent truth we all come to face, usually in moments of exhaustion, doubt, or silence, that no one else can fuel your fire. Not really. People can inspire you, encourage you, applaud your wins. But the inner spark, the force that keeps you going when no one is watching, has to come from within. That's why mastering focus isn't just about cutting distractions. It's about building emotional stamina, a kind of inner fire that refuses to burn out. Because some days you won't feel like showing up. You'll sit in front of your goals, your dreams, your responsibilities, and nothing inside you will move. You'll feel stuck, slow, heavy. On those days, motivation won't save you. Deadlines won't push you. Even your vision might seem far away. And that's where inner drive becomes your most valuable asset. The Stoics had no illusions about life being easy. They prepared themselves for discomfort, for fatigue, for failure, not to become numb, but to become ready. Seneca once said, "Difficulties strengthen the mind, as labor does the body." The more you train your focus in hard moments, the more powerful it becomes in the easy ones. That's how you build an unshakable core. Modern psychology calls this grit or mental resilience, but it's not just about toughness. It's about clarity. It's about reminding yourself why you began and choosing to begin again and again. Because repetition, not intensity, builds identity. Small, steady action, not bursts of emotion, is what carries you through the storm. To fuel yourself on those empty days, you have to return to your values. Not the outcomes, not the applause, not the goals even, but the reason behind it all. Why do you want to focus? Why do you want to become the kind of person who follows through? If the answer is only external, money, status, validation, your fire will flicker when the wind blows. But if it's internal, because you want to become someone you respect, then your focus becomes a reflection of your character, not your circumstances. Think of your attention as a sacred currency. Every time you give it away carelessly, you lose a little part of yourself. But every time you use it deliberately, even when it's hard, you reclaim your power. You're no longer waiting for the right mood or the right energy. You're creating it. You're building the kind of mind that says, "I don't need everything to be perfect. I just need to begin." Fuel in this context doesn't mean hype. It means discipline. It means rest. It means having systems that catch you when you fall. Morning routines, deep breathing, a quiet walk, journaling your thoughts. These rituals aren't luxuries. They are how you build a life that supports your focus, even when motivation fails you. So the next time you feel drained or scattered, ask yourself, What can I do to refuel without escaping? What small action will ground me right now? Because the goal isn't to never run low, it's to know how to fill back up. To be the kind of person who doesn't collapse when things get heavy, but who bends, breathes, and builds themselves back up quietly. This is what separates those who merely start from those who finish. The starters wait for the right feeling. The finishers learn how to create it. Your focus doesn't live in your feelings. It lives in your commitment. Protect it, feed it, train it, and it will carry you through. There's something profoundly underrated in today's world: patience. In an era of instant gratification, where likes, replies, deliveries, and dopamine all arrive within seconds, it's easy to forget that anything truly meaningful requires time. Not just time to build, but time to understand, to mature, to become worthy of. Success, real success, is not about the speed of arrival. It's about the depth of preparation. The long game is not sexy. It's not exciting. It's quiet, deliberate, often lonely, and that's why it works. The Stoics knew this. They practiced what they called praemeditatio malorum, the premeditation of adversity. They prepared their minds to wait, to endure, to move slowly through discomfort without losing faith. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "No great thing is created suddenly, any more than a bunch of grapes or a fig. You must let it ripen, you must let it grow, and above all, you must not abandon it just because it doesn't show results right away." Psychologically, your brain is wired to crave novelty. The new habit, the new goal, the new strategy, these offer spikes of motivation. But once the novelty wears off, your mind searches for another high. And if you don't train yourself to resist this craving, you become a wanderer, chasing spark after spark, but never building a fire. To play the long game, you need to detach your self-worth from immediate results. You need to focus on the process, the repetitions, the boring but essential actions that move you forward when no one is clapping. You need to get comfortable with being invisible for a while, because that's where the real transformation happens, beneath the surface, far from recognition. Think about a tree. Its roots grow deep before it ever reaches high. It spends seasons in silence, pushing into the darkness, anchoring itself, and only when the roots are strong enough does it begin to rise. Most people want to rise fast, but if your roots are shallow, the first storm will snap you. The long game asks something radical of you. To act today for rewards you may not see for years. It asks you to believe in things not yet visible, to invest energy in the invisible, to become loyal to a vision that only you can see. But here's the hidden gift. When you embrace the long game, you stop rushing, you stop comparing, you stop needing everything to happen now. And ironically, that's when you start moving faster. Not because you're impatient, but because you're focused, steady, aligned. So if you feel like you're behind, remember, time is not your enemy. Wasted attention is. If you can reclaim your focus, your direction, your rhythm, you can turn any year, any month, any day into the beginning of something great. Success that lasts is not built on a sprint. It's built on patience, persistence, and clarity. Slow down, aim deep, think long. That's where real power lives. Accountability. The word might sound heavy, maybe even restrictive, but in truth, it's one of the most powerful tools you have to shape your life. When you hold yourself accountable, not out of guilt or shame, but out of deep respect for your time and potential, you stop drifting. You stop negotiating with your lower self. You start becoming someone who follows through, not just someone who dreams. Most people say they want success, But what they really want is the feeling of wanting it, without the pressure of proving it. That's where accountability comes in. It's the invisible mirror that reflects your choices back to you. It doesn't care about your intentions. It only responds to your actions. And while that can be uncomfortable, it's also freeing. Because once you accept that your results come from what you actually do, not what you hope, plan, or promise, you stop waiting for life to change, and you begin changing yourself. The Stoics believed that character wasn't something you announced, it was something you demonstrated. Epictetus wrote, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." Accountability is embodiment. It's tracking your behavior against your principles. And the most powerful kind of accountability isn't to other people, it's to your future self. The version of you that's already done the work. The one who wakes up clear, grounded, and proud. Every day, your choices are either honoring or betraying that person. Psychologically, this matters more than most realize. Studies in behavioral science show that when people track their progress, even informally, they're more likely to follow through, more likely to stay motivated, and far more likely to adjust when they fall off track. Accountability turns vague hopes into visible systems. It builds structure where there was only emotion, and it gives your goals a spine. So how do you build this into your life? Start small. One daily habit, one promise you actually keep, one journal entry each evening asking, "Did I live today the way I said I would?" Not as punishment, but as clarity, as a signal to your brain that your values matter more than your moods. If you can, find someone you trust to walk with you, a mentor, a friend, even a community. But remember, external accountability can only carry you so far. Real power comes when you refuse to lie to yourself. When you say, "If I said I'll do it, I'll do it." Period. Not perfectly, not without setbacks, but with consistency and self-respect. You don't need to be watched, you need to be awakened, and accountability is the awakening of your own integrity. It is the quiet contract you sign with your future every single day. So if you want to rise, don't just set goals, set standards, and hold yourself to them, not because anyone is forcing you to, but because you've decided that your life is too important to waste on broken promises. Pause, reflect, evolve. These three words, simple on the surface, hold within them the full rhythm of growth. We often believe that change is built through action, through motion, through relentless forward progress. But the truth is, transformation doesn't only happen in motion. It happens in the stillness between the steps, in the quiet moments where you stop running and start reflecting. When was the last time you truly looked at your day, not to criticize yourself, but to understand, to ask what worked, what didn't, what did I avoid, what made me feel most alive? These aren't just casual questions, they're diagnostic tools for the soul. Without reflection, life becomes a blur. The days blend into one another, and the lessons that were meant to shape us dissolve into noise. The Stoics knew this well. At the end of each day, Marcus Aurelius would write in his private journal, not for an audience, not for legacy, but for clarity. He wasn't just living, he was studying himself, observing his choices, recalibrating his values. That's how a person grows, not by being flawless, but by being deeply, ruthlessly honest. Modern psychology backs this up. Reflective practice, especially when done consistently, has been shown to improve emotional intelligence, decision-making, and even long-term motivation. It allows your brain to encode lessons more deeply, to turn experiences into wisdom. Without this process, failure is just pain. But with it, failure becomes information, and success becomes something you can replicate, intentionally, not accidentally. So give yourself permission to pause, not out of weakness, but out of strength. Build a habit of ending each week, or each night, with a few quiet questions. Did I live in alignment with my vision? Did I waste time on things that didn't matter? What would I do differently if I could repeat this day? Write your answers down. Speak them out loud. Sit with them. Because the goal isn't to judge yourself, it's to know yourself. And self-awareness, more than any external strategy, is what fuels lasting change. Then evolve, slowly, steadily, intentionally. The person you are becoming isn't built through intensity. It's built through consistency, through wisdom, through the quiet decision to be just a little better today than you were yesterday. You don't have to sprint to the finish line. You just have to move forward, with eyes wide open and heart fully present. Pause, reflect, evolve. That's how transformation becomes real.